fabulous start to an amazing conference. I really enjoyed hearing from Dr. Gurib Fakim just a little while ago, and it's now my great pleasure to introduce the next panel, which is titled Our Post-COVID 21st Century, Positioning Women to Lead. My name is Leslie Powell. I'm an associate director in the Yale Office of International Affairs, and for the last 7 years, it has been my honor to run a program here at Yale for senior women leaders in Africa. And before I introduce the panelists, I'll just take a very short minute to tell you a little bit about the program. Back in 2014, Yale launched a partnership with the Women for Africa Foundation, which is based in Spain. The Women for Africa Foundation is an incredible organization that promotes the development of women, the equality of women, and rights and opportunities for women all across Africa and cutting across all sectors through a variety of different projects. The foundation was created by Maria Teresa Fernandez de la Vega. She's the former vice president of Spain. And she's been a forceful and visionary partner in this endeavor and was also instrumental in securing financial support from Banco Santander for our program. We welcomed the first cohort of African women leaders to the Yale campus in 2015, and we've been running the program every year since, although obviously in a virtual format the last couple of years. The network now comprises 75 women from 37 different countries on the continent and includes women who are, or were, or will be again, prime ministers, ministers, presidential candidates, political party leaders, members of parliament, judges, and all kinds of different women's rights advocates and activists. They're a huge inspiration to me and to everyone at Yale they've met and to one another. Through the program, they've discussed governance and policy issues with many Yale faculty over the years, and they've also met with peers in both the US government and in international organizations such as the UN, the World Bank, and the IMF. So that's a very brief sketch of the program. And now I'd like to turn to our distinguished panelists, all of whom are members of this network. Our moderator today is Obi Ezekwesili. Obi is a former and perhaps future presidential candidate in Nigeria. She's a founder or co-founder of many organizations, including Transparency International, Human Capital Africa, and the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance in Abuja. She's also been a vice president of the World Bank for Africa and Nigeria's Minister for Minerals and also for Education. Right now, we happen to be very lucky that she's here at Yale teaching in the Jackson Institute. Ka Wala hails from Cameroon, where she too is a once and perhaps future presidential candidate. She was the first woman ever to run for president there. Ka is the president of the Cameroon People's Party and is a high-profile political activist, women's leadership advocate, and entrepreneur. Ramatoulaye Diallo helped run a successful campaign for President Ibrahim Keita of Mali and became Minister of Tourism and Culture in that government. She's been active as a social entrepreneur, public relations operator, and intellectual property advocate, all of which helped Mali become a key player in the culture space in Africa. She's currently helping to run the Dubai Expo, which is a 6-month-long event that is the Middle East's first World Expo. And last but certainly not least, we're privileged to have with us today Martha Karua, a lawyer and politician from Kenya who has devoted her career to protecting women and expanding democracy. She was a member of parliament for 20 years. She served at various points as Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs and Minister of Water. She too ran for president and continues to be active in politics. So I've done more than enough talking. I want to turn things over to our panelists. And the final thing I'll say is that you should feel free to post any questions in the Q&A function, and there will be time at the end for those questions. So over to you, Obi. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much, Leslie. for the wonderful introduction of our very wonderful leaders of the continent of Africa. I'm usually excited when we're all doing things together because it is so critical that women should work together to contest the space that refuses to shift significantly to admit of a very strong population of people with talents seeking to support the progress of not just our communities, but our countries, our continent, and of course the world. As my panelists and sisters have been introduced, we'll just go straight to this session today. So I'm going to start with Rama. You know, Rama, joblessness amongst the young people and women on our continent of Africa is actually at a dangerous level. Only 1 out of every 6 young people is employed. In which employment? More than 60% of our women are informal, really low productivity work of one kind or the other. So they are trapped at a level in poverty. Africa needs to create 20 million jobs annually in order to absorb its population that enters the labor market, mostly young people and women. Rama, you are a lover of education. I know that about you. You're always talking about the need for education to act as the economic and social mobility opportunity for people. And so I find you criticizing education as being now of manufacturing students without the skills for employability. Now, as we look at our post-COVID world, what are your fears and what are you thinking could begin to shape things differently from your vantage view? Over to you, Rama. You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, good. Is it good?
Yes, it's very good. No, you're muted again. Good.
Is it good now?
Yeah, it is good now. You look lovely.
Yes. Thank you so much, my lovely sister. Good to see you all today. Obi, thank you for this wonderful question, but you yourself gave all the answers in your questions, but I will still try. You know, Obi, I do not claim to have a magical formula that is capable of a revolutionary change in our education system in Africa. However, I do think that we will have to start by putting in place 3 pillars. Number 1, we must move from an education that is too general, too broad, to specific apprenticeship of trades by privileging science and technology. And number 2, we must work hard to change the mentalities of our young people, more specifically our young girls, and orient them more towards entrepreneurship and not towards bureaucracy. The cult of the diploma has shown its limits, Obi, and you know that better than me. Today, we meet young people with diplomas obtained in major schools around the world, but they do not even know what to do with their 10 fingers. And that is a drama to me. Number 3, and final, I think we must build a bridge between companies and schools to ensure that training curricula correspond to the needs of the companies, and that the skills developed are those needed in the labor market. We have planned ministers and planning ministers, or however you call them, in all of our countries. And that is the job. But the gap between the social needs, the school supply, and the market demand continues to widen. And that is not normal to me. Basically, what I have to say about that.
You know, that's fantastic, because in your 3 pillars, you clearly cover what it takes for us to begin to deal with unemployability as well as expanding opportunities for employment. So thank you so very much for starting us on that very specific note. And so the next question is going to Kat. Kat, my goodness, you're so irrepressible, and you know I love you for that. You know, it's amazing. So you are this soul that dedicated her whole life to questioning, really questioning and contesting a very hegemonic political structure. You ran for president and shocked everybody, and the political establishment felt insulted that such a young woman would dare a president that nobody could look in the face. And bravo to you, my dear. But you know, you've been on this for so long, and it leads me to asking you the question: how are we going to ensure that this happens? Because I don't know what you justify for women participation. Why? Why do we need women participation in politics, Kat?
Thank you so much, Obi. It's such an honor to be on this panel with amazing women. I think the first thing we have to realize, which people don't understand enough, is that African women have been part of politics from time immemorial. If we go to the 1500s, mid 1500s to mid 1600s, we have figures like Amina of Zaria. We have figures like Zinga of Angola. Amina of Zaria is credited today to be the first person to conceive of a state on the African continent, to see a geographic space as a state and to build the systems that are needed by the states. We go, skip down to the 1930s and talk about the tax revolts that the women in Nigeria, in Cameroon, and in Togo led, which built up to the independence of these countries. And since independence, women have been part of politics. So it's not a matter of women entering politics. We've been there. It's our place. It's our right. We're not asking for permission to be there. Now, where we are in Africa today, for most of our countries, we need a fundamental systemic change. We need states that can adhere to fundamental democratic principles that are the social contract between those who govern and those who are governed. We need states that can build systems that can deliver. It is a disgrace to us. I was listening to your statistics about employment. I work on that professionally. I just finished doing the African Union strategy for employment. It's a disgrace that for decades, we are looking at the same statistics. 50% of Africans don't have access to water. 60% of Africans don't have access to electricity. And 80% of Africans are working in the informal sector without decent jobs. The same statistics for decades. And for a lot of countries, the same presidents for decades. So we have the same system, which has been unable to deliver. And today, we need women to step up and take the top levels of leadership, because we need a complete and fundamental change to these systems. And the third aspect is that we need inclusive governance. In Africa, we are governing states without the people. We have governments who are governing things called states, but they are not governing people. And we need the women's leadership to bring in this inclusive governance. So the type of change we need in Africa today means that women have to be at the center of it. And thank God, Obi, that we are already at the forefront. There are 3 presidential candidates on this panel. Imagine if what our continent would look like if Obi was running Nigeria, Martha was running Kenya, and Ka was running Cameroon. We would be having a completely different conversation.
Ka will definitely run Cameroon.
Oh yes, of course. And I'm thrilled in this moment because MSAS in Nigeria is led by women. In Cameroon, political transition is led by women. Fixed politics in Nigeria is led by women. And women across the continent are participating in it. So it's actually a very exciting moment. This change has to happen for us in Africa within the next 5 to 10 years, or we will perish. And so we are there. We are right at the center of it. We've grabbed hold of it, and believe you me, LB, we're going to make it happen.
Wow, what an optimistic presentation. As usual, Ka, you electrify the room in your persistent optimism. I really just love you for that. And another person that I know for indefatigability is our dear Mata Kaura, the quintessential political leader. She has challenged the Kenyan men so often that I when they hear her name, they begin to shiver. Mata, we're glad to have you on this program today. And I'd like to say to you that, look, you have run for office quite a couple of times. You ran for president in 2013. Then you ran to become a governor in 2017. And now you're preparing again to run to be a governor because you clearly probably decided to approach this whole political representation thing from the bottom, going up. Please tell me, what is the passion that is driving this, your determination to serve your people? Because we know that most of your counterparts think that politics is for the sake of politics. What's driving your own passion, Mata? Why must you serve your people?
I think in one short sentence, I'll say it's the need to get it done.
Wow.
You know, we don't just sit there and let things go wrong. And we feel we have something to offer. That is what brought me to politics as a young woman. And that is what is driving me as an older woman to run. I keep saying I have unfinished business with the presidency. But because our politics has been so monetized, I looked at the crazy logistics needed currently for the big office and thought that let me go for governor, which is a smaller space but mirrors the presidency because you can do things. You are in charge of policy and action. And I thought, let me serve at this place as a starting point to rally enough support for the top. And I can assure you that God giving me long life, I will serve the people of Kirinyaga and I'll do my best for them. And it will help me in my journey to the unfinished business because our country requires so much. I look at what has been happening during COVID, an opportunity to strengthen our broken health system, but that's not the way it has been utilized. Our health facilities are as they were. Access is worse because hospitals are already burdened with COVID. Our healthcare workers have worked without, and are still working without adequate protective equipment, not because we do not have ability, because we've received grants, we've even borrowed, but things are being misapplied. I look at people suffering. They can't get tested, those on the lower bracket, because they can't afford it. They cannot even afford treatment, and they go to hospital when it's too late because the government picked treatment and testing in public facilities only for a few months and then dropped it. How they hope we can fight a pandemic without access to a majority of people, I do not know. The list is endless of the things that need to be done. And that is what drives me, that there's so much that requires to be done. And I ask myself, why not me? Because I have a civic duty as a citizen to do the best for my country. That is the driving force.
I love that. Well, the audience will surely have heard from our three panelists already. I'm getting a sense that there is mission driving the passion. It's not passion for the sake of passion. And so in the next round of our questions on this panel, I'm going to try and dig in a bit in a certain level of specificity. So I start with you, Rama. You know, Rama, the thing is, politics is made to be an end in itself. People acquire power and produce no results. The economic well-being of citizens that's supposed to be at the heart of formal position in countries, appears not to be the most important thing because people can get elected over and over again without delivering results. And so you have focused on writing a book, an interesting, inspiring book on economic warfare. Please give us an insight into how you're connecting economic warfare to what's going on in terms of economic development on our continent.
Thank you so much, my dear Obi. Obi, you know, as Marta and Ka have been saying, I think we've tried a lot. I've been in the civil society. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been in the government as a minister for 7 years. I've been everywhere, but I've been also a mother. And then I say, maybe let's try it from that angle. Obi, to me, writing is the fundamental block to build a legacy. Because today we have no choice but to start focusing in building a new generation of public women leaders. And this book is certainly a personal story, but it's also a story within a story of a nation, a story of a continent. While the African and international opinion is crystallized on what is said to be the war against terrorism, which is indeed the major threat on the existence of my nation and all the Sahel countries in their democratic and republican form. But the reality is that this war of terrorism is hiding the biggest war of our continent. And that war is economic warfare, less visible on medias, but like a voracious octopus, like I love to say it, silent yet violent with a long-lasting suffocating effect on the African economies. So it's so sad to watch a handful of multinationals with the convenience of the predatory political leaders capture the national wealth of the poor African countries under the excuse of the free markets. So economic warfare has always been thought of as an affair of states, government, and multinational corporations. However, the unprecedented revolution of technology has led to the emergence of a new generation of aware and engaged consumers. Gladly today, these consumers exercise their reach to influence brands and their decision. What is changing or what needs to be changed to me is the evolution of power from the hands of those political predators and corporations to the hands of the consumers. Because this economic war has nothing to do with culture and religions. The African consumers.
Let me step in there quickly and ask. Assuming Mali inaugurated President Rama today, what would she do? Two things that she would do instantly that reverses what you just described.
Like I said, I will first focus on the education of the youth, not only women, but the youth. Marta mentioned something about COVID that we all faced right now. Mali is not the best example, unfortunately, today. But you know that we've been going through, I was a member of our last legal government. For 10 months now, we still are being ruled by military putschs. So again, under the war of terrorism. So the war, the real war is the warfare of economy. Mm-hmm. So let me give you an example, Obi, just one quick example. If the 200 millions of Nigerians decide to consume local Tommy Brown, is that how you call it? Tommy Brown? Produced by small local processing units rather than paying from other imported brands, all the local value chains will be pulled from the bottom to the top. And that will also create millions of jobs. And this is what we need right now. Likewise, another example, sorry for some women that might be, thinking that I'm just hitting on them, but the fake hair industry, Obi, represents over hundreds of billions in West Africa. If a critical mass of African women decided to enhance the natural hair with our local beautiful products widely available, it would not only be a cultural revolution, but also an economic revolution with millions of jobs as a result.
Very interesting, Rama. I think that, a key point that you're making here is that a President Rama would be looking at trade, at Africa improving its own stake in manufacturing so that it can trade with the others. It's not that you're saying, let's become inward looking to the detriment of trade, because trade is an important factor for economic growth, as we know. Yes.
Of course, Obi, you're so right. And I also want to focus on what Gandhi had tried in India, and it had worked. So products made in Africa by Africans for Africans.
And for the world, not just for Africa.
As of the world, as part of the world, of course.
Excellent.
As part of the world.
That's great. Look, it's Car next. Car, I need to ask you, this is what came out of the World Economic Forum 2021 Gender Gap Report, right? And it says that across the 156 countries covered by the index, women represent only 26.1% of 35,500 parliament seats and just 22.6% of over 3,400 ministers worldwide. In 81 countries, there has never been a woman head of state as of the 15th of January 2021. And you can imagine that majority of these would be in countries like, in countries of Africa, where we probably have a handful of about 8 or so that have either been one president or prime minister of some sort. So it is saying that it would take the world 145.5 years to close the gap, the political representation gap. 145,000 car. We're going to be leaving this problem behind for our children. What must we do differently? Because what are we going to do that we have not done yet? Or what have we been doing that we have to do differently? So over to you.
Thank you, Obi. I want to link my answer to just your previous conversation. I think if we want economies that can deliver in Africa, the building blocks is functional states. You know, I really want to, there's no economy without a state that is functioning. Because I think there's a discourse in Africa as we can develop from the private sector and so on. That's nonsense. For the private sector to develop, you need electricity, you need water, you need roads, you need good internet, and those things are the function of the state. And you need a state that conceives of education in the sense of economic productivity. And so we need a state that looks at these African women who are producing, who are in the economy. We have the highest women's economic activity rate in the world, but we are at the bottom of the pyramid. And so our countries are not benefiting from our ability to produce economically. So what do we need to do differently? We need women in power, and we know what works, Obi. Let's not shy away from it. Rwanda, South Africa, Senegal have some of the highest representation of women in parliaments in the world. How did they get there? They set a quota and it had to be met. We will not change this incrementally. And this is for my American sisters out there listening, because Americans get very nervous when you talk about quotas. But this is what works. If we don't want to be dealing with this problem for the next 150 years, then we set quotas, and quotas make absolute sense. You cannot have half of your population, which is simply not represented in the governance of the country. And as soon as you say quotas for women, then people start saying merit, oh, but we have to have people. We have so many unqualified men running the world to ruin. Why is it that once we start talking about women, then merit becomes the issue? Of course, we want qualified people in governance. And if we set quotas, quotas do not mean that you relegate qualification to the side. On the contrary, you have quotas, and then you have the criteria for everybody who needs to be in governance. So in my opinion, if I got into power, believe you me, the thing that I would be putting on the table of the parliament would be, let us have clear quotas. In Africa, we need quotas for women. We need quotas for young people. We are a continent that has over 60% of our population, which is under 25 years old, and we have the 5%, which is over 70 years old, running the majority of the continent. No wonder it's not working. So I think we have a couple of things that we know how to do. And of course, this is accompanied with quotas for education, quotas for getting women into entry-level jobs, quotas for moving from the informal sector where women dominate to transition into the formal sector. Across the board, our continent, we have such amazing women on this continent. And these women are already up there. They're already in the economy. They're already, you know, in the civil society. They're already in holding the families together. Give them the opportunity to actually be productive, and the entire continent is going to win.
You know, something you said reminded me of a famous quote that my dad always used. He would say that we cannot stay with the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. So you're basically saying that incrementalism would see us perhaps even having to wait for 200 years before the parity is achieved. And therefore, there is need to use non-distortionary quotas. You're asking not that we should lower standards. You're simply saying, look for the women, set a bar, look for the women and deliberately and intentionally ensure that they are participating in the political leadership of countries. How awesome.
Exactly.
I'm coming back. I've been following you for a long time, so I know the way you think. I'm coming to you, Martha. Martha, thank you very much for carrying in a very specific way the card concerning the COVID issues on our continent. You know, it's amazing. The kind of prognosis that was laid out for our continent was quite frightening. The fatalities that people imagined was out of this world. You know, the thing is that it turns out in a very, perhaps by divine providence, that we've ended up being the continent with less fatalities than anyone imagined across the regions of the world. We have 219 cases of death around of cases of 4.5 million deaths, I think, worldwide, and then we have 219 million cases of infection. When you look at our continent, it is slightly a different story, because we ended up with less than 200,000 deaths so far. May God comfort the families involved. But one thing that I want to draw out of what happened with COVID is that whereas it did not affect women, even in the number of infections and deaths, according to statistics, women were the prominent caregivers. They were the prominent nurses. They were the health workers. They were the epidemiologists. They were the doctors that could be found. There was this resilience on the part of women to come to duty on the matter of the health pandemic. Does that give us a sign of what women can do in terms of emerging crisis and preparing for the response mechanisms toward them? Please take the stage, Martha.
Absolutely. Resilience is the other name of a woman anywhere in the world. And if you look at what has happened in the continent of Africa, where over 60% of the health workers are women, it is just amazing. And women have done well, not just in the health sector, but also at home, because women are the caregivers and paid care work. Whenever anybody gets sick, it's a woman's business to care for them. And that means women were risking their lives, risking contracting COVID when nursing those who are sick at home. I had occasion to nurse a daughter and she recovered. It was not severe and we did it at home, but the average woman will have come into contact with somebody who is afflicted. And that actually demonstrates women's nature, the average woman's nature. And I know that women, an inclusive government that has women, will bring in this resilience of women, this determination. And this is what will drive a revolution, a positive revolution in Africa, economic, social. It will deal with joblessness. I look at my country and I look at many African countries. We have all the resources, yet we are classified as poor. The real problem we have is leadership. Leadership that can stick to good governance, leadership that will do its best to deliver to the people, not to divert resources. I am not saying all women are saints, but I'm saying an inclusive government that has half women, half men will automatically deliver. And a research done shows that even companies that have more women at the top do better. So this is not something we are gainsaying. And I keep on saying, let's go back and look at our homes, our families. When you see the resilience of women in difficult circumstances, even under the COVID stress, feeding their families, making ends meet, that is what is required. That determination, that self-sacrifice to see our countries transform.
So I'm going to follow on this very robust answer that you gave and ask you to paint a picture of the post-COVID Africa that you see. What does it look like? Can you just imagine Africa post-COVID? What would we need to do to get outcomes that are different from what we are getting in health, in education, in economy, and of course, in governance, especially the inclusive governance we spoke about? What do we need to do?
I imagine a post-COVID Africa where women are not just waiting for the government to bring about the policies, where women become architects of their own destiny. Women are in political parties. Women are majority of voters. Let us have a conversation and join hands. Let us drive the agenda. Let us drive the politics. Let us drive the initiative of getting value-based leaders and therefore value-based governments. Let women arise. We've got to do this for ourselves. Quotas help, but they are not the only means. I have seen in Kenya, our parliament is becoming increasingly young. It means young people are voting in themselves. Women of Africa, we need to join hands. We need to put ourselves by design and very deliberately on the decision-making table so that we may transform the lives of our children and we may transform our continent.
You know, what I really like about the question, the way you answer this question is take responsibility. That's really the summary of what you've said. Women, it is time to take responsibility. And you've also used data to show that if women would use their number, leverage their number very well in politics, they can change outcomes. Thank you so much, Martha. Listen, Rama,
Yes.
you know, you've been doing a lot in terms of trying to expose the economic opportunities on the continent. Paint the image of a post-recovery economy for Africa, for our participants today. What does it look like?
Sorry, I cannot hear you.
What's your picture? What's your picture of a post-COVID recovery agenda for Africa so that the economy will not be one of warfare?
Great, Obi. I think I see this as an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity of rethinking the transformation of Africa, the transformation of the economy of Africa. And I do believe, as we've all been saying today, that women are those agents of transformation. Let's not even go far. Let's start from this network that we have right here. I don't think that we've been using it as much as we should. We have strong women here. If we get together to work globally on the continent, I think, Obi, you know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
We can take it to another level.
Excellent.
So together we can.
Excellent. I think I hear you very loud and clear. And I believe that Leslie and the team, Eddie and co at the Africa program definitely hear you loud and clear. The network needs to activate even more. So now we're going to give the audience, those who have been quietly listening to us, the opportunity to ask my brilliant, amazing panelists questions. I'm going to hand over to Leslie to help me with this. Les, are you ready? What questions are we getting? And so shoot.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you very well.
I had to fuss with my earphones. Yes, those of you in the audience who would like to ask a question, go to the Q&A function on your screens and type your questions in right there. And while we do that, I'll take the liberty of asking the first question.
Yes.
Thank you, for starters, to all of you for sharing your thoughts. It's been fascinating. I'll start with this question, and it's for any of you or all of you. You talked a little bit about certain kinds of laws and quotas and other kinds of bureaucratic or legal mechanisms that may work to put women in positions of power in a formal sense, but possibly without changing the underlying cultural or societal or familial biases that created the inequality in the first place. So I'm wondering what you think of, how do you change these more fundamental attitudes and behaviors, which it seems to me aren't necessarily even affected by laws?
Anyone wants to take a dive?
Yes. Yes,
Go
please.
ahead, Mata. Go ahead, Mata.
Yes, Leslie, I think by putting women on the decision-making table, you slowly begin to change the attitudes. I will tell you, after 20 years being a member of parliament of a constituency in Kenya, the young children in that constituency believed being a member of parliament was a woman's job. And many women
like that
have now been vying. Actually, the contest for governor is increasingly becoming between strong women and in the neighboring constituencies as well. So having women at the decision-making table, you are already changing the culture. There is another way of changing the patriarchal culture. Our reference books in schools perpetuate patriarchy. We need to revise our education system. We need to have more inclusive policies that target all the areas that perpetuate patriarchy. It should be a continuing education, a continuing conversation, and quotas are one of the ways of the entry point. And I want to say that I know great men who started through quotas, not exactly quotas for men, but seats set aside for nomination. The president of Kenya today is one such person. Thank you.
I knew you were going to find a way to snuck that in. Okay, thank you. Leslie, I'm sure you got the answer to that question in a fabulous way.
No, so the power of representation and example.
Power of, and modeling, role modeling. Yeah. You know, that point is a fantastic point. The more that people in society see women doing brilliant work, then it basically sends the message that leadership is gender neutral. You know, all it takes to be a leader is gender neutral. And people need to understand that when they see more women in leadership positions. So that's part of the way we address these cultural roadblocks and the structural issues that stand in the way. Do I speak for all of us, dear sisters?
Of course, Obi. I just wanted to add one point to that, Obi. You know, in my country, there is something very interesting. You know, the meaning of leadership has been evolving in our culture, which is something great. Leadership used to mean give orders. And women found a way to kind of change this culturally to say, no, leadership means to be a good role model, a good example.
Interesting. That's
so
amazing.
This is basically what you've been saying. Let us be the good role models and set the best examples. And of course, we can get how as far as Rwanda and South Africa, as Carl was mentioning it.
Because language and culture are so self-reinforcing. So when you change something in language, it then begins to affect culture and attitudes. So thank you. Leslie, that was a really good question you asked, and it's drawn quite some interesting answers. Over to you again.
Yeah, so I'm conscious of the time. We have very few minutes left, but so let me ask two questions that have come in, and then you could respond, any of you can respond to either of them. The first question is about corruption how corruption often starts at the lowest or most local level and migrates upward. And even among leaders who have campaigned initially on anti-corruption platforms, how difficult it can be to battle that. So that's one question: is how do you, or how would you tackle this issue? The second question is, what are some of the ways new technologies can be used to advance women in Africa, and what kinds of initiatives in this area have you seen work? And unfortunately, we only have about 4 minutes to tackle both of these.
Yeah, so take 2 minutes each, and I would pass this question to you, Ka, the one on corruption, and I would pass the technology one to you, Rama, and 2 minutes each, perhaps 1.5, so that we can say goodbye collectively with 1 minute.
Great. The corruption question, I first of all, I disagree. I don't think corruption travels from the bottom up. I think it travels from the top down. And that is because corruption is about systems. People, human beings are corrupt. The corruption is a part of human society. And when we look at the societies that have been effectively able to combat corruption, you need leadership that is serious about combating corruption. That's number one. If you don't have that, you're never going to be less corrupt. But then immediately, you need to look at the systemic nature of corruption. In my country, Cameroon, the first thing I would do is remove cash from the system. So there's a link between technology and corruption these days. Today in Africa, we have mobile money, we have, you can do bank transfers, you can do internet transfers and so on. Guess what? We still pay for administrative services in cash. You have a baby, you want a birth certificate, you go to the local government, you pay cash. You want to have X or Y service from government, you pay cash. As soon as people are handling cash, you greatly increase the possibilities of corruption. So pull the cash out of the system. Make all payments to government electronic, through phone or whatever, and let the person show up with their receipt and get access to their service. That would be number one way of getting out.
You have this minute left.
Okay, number two is accountability. Set up hotlines, real ones, where the population can call in, complain, and get an immediate reaction if they have been subject to corruption. And you will find that the population becomes your biggest army fighting against corruption.
Excellent. And then remove government from economic activities it has no business doing, because
Absolutely.
then you reduce opportunity for corruption at that grand level. Over to you, Rama, on technology.
Well, Ka, you said it all. Come on. I wanted to jump on my favorite subject, which is the corruption, and link to the technology. But basically, I mean, after what has been said, I would just say that we need the emergence of a clean, contactless economy in Africa. And the Rwanda case is a very good one. The mobile money transactions rose, I would say, during the lockdown, and we've noticed a boom after the COVID. And we just all need, because we only have 1 minute, please, I will ask any of you to go to the Rwanda case and see how they've been using technology, especially the women in the market. Mm-hmm. People with no degrees. Mm-hmm. You should see how they use their mobiles to get things done. And yes, the one thing that we need to stop fighting with all our heart and forces is the corruption in the higher decision maker system.
Thank you so much.
And one last word, Obi, I know we're running out of time. Please, Leslie and Eddie, let's take this network system to the higher level, please, to the next level. I'm really insisting on it.
Okay, thank you very much. I've played my role as a moderator. You've heard the panelists, and one thing that is for certain, 3 things will shape Africa going forward: the women, the young people, and technology. These 3 things have come up several times in the conversation today. I assure you that Africa will definitely claim the 21st century. Over to you, Leslie, for your
Thank
closing.
you so much, Obi, and thank you to Ka, Rama, and Martha. This was wonderful. We're going to take a very short break. I think we have 3 minutes before the start of the next panel. And anybody who's been listening, please be sure to fill out the survey, which can be found on your screen. We'll reconvene again in about 3 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, all. Bravo.
Thank
Bravo,
you.
Obi.
It was wonderful. Thank you.